Here was a time when our ancestors were not alone on this earth. If you walked through the deep forests of Europe or along the coastlines of Asia 50,000 years ago, you would have met other kinds of humans. They spoke, they made tools, and they looked at the stars just like we do. Some had thick bones and heavy brows to survive the bitter cold. Some lived in dark caves and painted on stone walls. Some grew no taller than a modern 3-year-old child. Some crossed wide seas on simple wooden rafts. Today, there is only us. Not the smartest, not the strongest, not the ones who had been around the longest. Just the last ones standing. Why are we alone? The answer to this question does not lie in a single dramatic disaster. There was no great plague that wiped out everyone else, no giant asteroid, and no single war that we won. The real story is much messier and unfolded over thousands of years. It is a story of slow changes in the weather, small differences in birth rates, and pure blind luck. Then there are the Neanderthals, the most famous of our lost cousins. Many people still think of them as dumb, brutish cavemen who could only grunt. That old picture is wrong. Neanderthals buried their dead with care, made jewelry from eagle claws, and used red paint to decorate cave walls. They had brains just as large as ours, and their bodies were shorter and stronger, built to hold in heat during the ice ages. They lived across Europe and Western Asia for more than 350,000 years. Yet, about 40,000 years ago, they vanished from the fossil record, leaving behind only small traces of their DNA in modern humans. We do not know exactly why they disappeared while we survived. Maybe our ancestors brought new diseases that their bodies could not fight. Maybe they struggled to find enough meat as the great forests turned into cold, open grasslands. Maybe we simply had slightly larger social groups that helped us share food during hard times. Maybe we did not hunt them down, but simply absorbed them into our own growing populations. In the end, their strength was not enough to save them when their world began to shift. Then there are the Denisovans, a group we knew nothing about until very recently. You might expect a new human species to be found as a whole skeleton in a grand tomb, but the truth is much more humble. Scientists found them by studying a single tiny finger bone and a couple of large teeth found in a cold cave in Siberia. From these tiny scraps, researchers extracted ancient DNA and realized they had found an entirely new branch of the human family. This group lived across Asia, and their DNA suggests they split from the Neanderthals around 400,000 years ago. We have almost no bones from them, so we do not even know what they looked like, let alone why they died out. We only know they were there because modern people in places like Tibet still carry their genes today. Maybe they were always small in number and simply faded away. Maybe they lived in high, cold mountains where life was too hard to sustain them. Maybe they met our ancestors and became part of our family tree. They show us that we can vanish from the earth and leave almost no physical mark behind. Then there is the strange case of Homo floresiensis, often called the hobbits of the human world. We used to think that human evolution was a simple march toward getting bigger and smarter, but these small people prove that story wrong. They lived on a remote island in Indonesia, where they shared their home with giant rats and small, dog-sized elephants. When animals get stuck on small islands with limited food, they often get smaller over many generations to survive. These humans did exactly that, shrinking to only 3 feet tall. They had brains the size of a chimpanzee's, but they still made stone tools, used fire, and hunted together. They survived on their island until about 50,000 years ago, long after our own species had spread across the rest of the world. We still do not know what finally brought their long run on the island to an end. Maybe a massive volcanic eruption covered their island in ash and destroyed their food. Maybe our ancestors arrived on the island and took over their hunting grounds. Maybe the changing climate dried up the forests they relied on for survival. They show us that nature does not always favor the biggest brains or the tallest bodies. Then there is Homo erectus, the true giants of human history when it comes to survival. We often look down on earlier humans as simple evolutionary steps on the way to us. but Homo erectus was arguably more successful than we are. They were the first humans to walk fully upright, the first to control fire, and the first to leave Africa to explore the wider world. They walked on long, strong legs and had brains that grew larger over time. They made a simple stone tool called the hand axe, and they kept making it the exact same way for over 1 million years. They survived as a species for nearly 2 million years, which is about 6 times longer than our own species has existed so far. Yet, after such an incredibly long run, they faded away, with their last known remains found on the island of Java. Maybe they could not adapt when the wet, warm forests of Southeast Asia turned into dry grasslands. Maybe they ran out of the large animals they depended on for food. Maybe newer, faster-moving human species pushed them out of their old homes. Their long survival reminds us that even the most successful species can eventually run out of time. Then there is the mystery of Homo naledi, discovered deep inside a dark cave system in South Africa. You might think that complex behaviors, like burying the dead, are things only big-brained humans like us could do, but these creatures challenge that belief. They had bodies built for climbing trees, orange-sized brains, and long, curved fingers. To get to their bones, scientists had to hire small, slender researchers who could fit through a gap just 7 inches wide. Yet hundreds of these ancient bones were found deep inside this narrow cave passage. This suggests they carried their dead there on purpose, deep into the dark. They lived around 300,000 years ago, sharing the continent of Africa with our own early ancestors. We still do not know how they navigated those pitch-black cave tunnels, or why they went to such extreme lengths to place their dead inside them. Maybe they used fire to light their way through the narrow stone cracks. Maybe they had a culture and a set of beliefs that we will never truly understand. Maybe they were pushed into the deep caves by stronger competitors outside. They show us that a small brain does not mean a simple mind. So why did we survive when all these other humans, with their large brains, tools, and strength, faded away? It is tempting to say we were simply smarter, or that we were better hunters who fought our way to the top. But the science suggests this is too simple. Neanderthals had brains as big as ours, and Homo erectus survived far longer than we have. We were not inherently superior in every way. Instead, our survival might come down to how we connected with each other. While other humans lived in small, cut-off family groups, we built large networks. We traded tools across hundreds of miles and shared information with strangers. This meant that if a local group died out, their knowledge lived on in others. We survived not because of our individual strength, but because we could work together in numbers that no other species could match. Our success was a mix of this social connection, a few lucky breaks with the weather, and the simple fact that we kept moving. We often think of human history as a straight ladder, with us standing at the very top. But the truth is more like a wild, thick bush that had many green branches growing out in all directions. Most of those branches were cut short by time, leaving us as the only leaf on the very last branch. If you went back 50,000 years, you would see a world crowded with different kinds of human faces. Our position as the only humans left is not a permanent rule of nature. It is a new and unusual situation. We have only been alone for a very short part of our history, and the forces that took our cousins away are still very much alive today. We are not safe just because we are here now. We are simply the ones who are left, for now.